Let's begin here, because too many people believe a greeting is only politeness. A word, a handshake, maybe a hug, nothing more. But that first moment between two people is never empty. It carries energy, it carries memory, it carries desire. A true greeting is the opening of a hidden door. It is the threshold where the unconscious shows its hand before the mind has time to prepare a mask. The eyes reveal longing. The voice betrays warmth or hesitation. The body leans closer or holds back. And in that small window, the truth often shines brighter than any later words. Before I continue, let me know where you're listening from in the comments. And if reflections like this resonate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now think about how much weight we place on declarations, speeches, and promises while dismissing the smallest gestures. Many assume love reveals itself through dramatic words. Yet Jung reminded us that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That transformation begins not in the speech, but in the spark at the doorway. In ordinary life, most greetings are mechanical. We pass neighbors, coworkers, cashiers, repeating the same polite rhythm. The persona, the social mask, performs its duty. But when attraction is present, the shadow breaks through. Something shifts. A smile lingers too long. The eyebrows lift with surprise. The tone of voice softens without intention. These signs belong not to etiquette, but to the unconscious trying to speak. This is why the smallest detail matters. A glance at your hair, a light touch on your arm, a laugh that arrives too quickly. These are not trivialities. They are symbols. They are the psyche's way of confessing what the ego dares not yet admit. Jung taught us that what is repressed does not vanish. It seeks expression in other forms. A greeting becomes one of those forms. The deeper truth is this: you do not need to chase confessions to know where you stand. The soul announces itself quietly if you have the patience to observe. Attraction does not need a stage. It reveals itself in a doorway, in a single moment of eye contact. And when you learn to notice these openings, you begin to live closer to the real, not the rehearsed. So in this journey, we will explore how greetings carry hidden messages, how the unconscious leaks into posture, touch, and smile, and how recognition of these signs brings clarity. Because what the body whispers in the first seconds often matters more than anything the mouth says afterward. A fracture often begins in silence, not in a loud disagreement. It begins when a woman feels something stir in those first seconds of greeting, and then later doubts herself. Did she imagine it? Was that smile only manners? Was the slight touch only habit? Many have lived this tension. What felt meaningful in the body quickly collapses under the weight of self-criticism in the mind. This is the first wound in attraction, the uncertainty between what appears polite and what feels personal. The heart whispers yes, while the mind insists no. The shadow grows in that conflict. A woman senses attention, but fears she has misread. She remembers past moments where she trusted her instincts and was left embarrassed. So now she hesitates. She dismisses her perception, calling it foolishness. Jung observed that when the unconscious is ignored, it punishes us with doubt and repetition. What is not seen clearly becomes a cycle. The woman begins to mistrust her own inner compass. She hides behind the Sissa persona, the mask of indifference. Outwardly, she appears unbothered, but inwardly, she's at war with herself. The fracture is not in the man's greeting, but in her own split perception. Consider how often attraction is dismissed as imagination. A man leans forward when he says hello. His eyes soften, his tone shifts, yet she tells herself, he's just friendly. Don't overthink it. This is the modern form of repression, the silencing of intuition. What the psyche registers is erased by the rational voice that fears being wrong. This disconnection is painful because it denies the body's truth. In those moments, the persona grows stronger. The social mask says stay polite, stay neutral, do not reveal what you feel. Meanwhile, the shadow gathers energy beneath the surface. The neglected instinct becomes resentment. The woman begins to feel unseen, even when she was in fact noticed. She creates distance, not because nothing was there, but because she mistrusted her ability to perceive it. This fracture has consequences. Over time, repeated doubt weakens confidence. She stops noticing the small symbols altogether. She convinces herself that nothing ever happens, that she is invisible. The irony is that her own refusal to believe has blinded her to recognition. Jung wrote that we are dominated by the things we refuse to see. Here, the refusal to see attention turns into a deeper conviction of being overlooked. This is why the first fracture matters. It is not simply about one greeting or one man. It is about a pattern where self-perception collapses under fear of misinterpretation. When this continues, a woman may settle for only the obvious, the loud, the undeniable, but by then much of the subtle truth has been lost. The fracture also reveals something about projection. A woman who carries old wounds of rejection will project them onto new encounters. Even a warm smile becomes filtered through her memory of being dismissed before. The greeting is no longer present. It is crowded by ghosts from the past. This is the shadow's way of repeating pain until it is finally faced. At this stage, the unconscious speaks, but she does not listen. The greeting contains symbols of desire, but she discards them as fantasy. The persona tells her to be sensible, rational, composed. Yet inwardly, she feels the tension of missed recognition. She begins to mistrust not only others, but herself. This is the first fracture, the gap between appearance and essence. On the surface, the interaction looks polite. Beneath, the soul recognizes something more. But when fear silences intuition, that deeper reality is left unnamed. The woman turns away from her own perception, and in doing so, she turns away from herself. It is important to pause here. The fracture is not failure. It is the necessary beginning of awareness. To feel doubt is to realize that something larger is stirring. If every greeting were easy to read, there would be no depth to the experience. It is precisely in the ambiguity that the unconscious finds room to move. Think of it this way. A crack appears in the surface of a mirror. At first, it feels like damage, yet the fracture also allows us to see the difference between mask and truth. In that tension, individuation begins. The woman who feels torn is already standing at the threshold of insight. Jung understood that symbols carry the weight of what the mind cannot name. The smile, the eyebrow lift, the lingering touch, these are symbols. They belong to the soul's language, not the ego's. The fracture arises because the ego demands certainty while the soul speaks in subtleties. The challenge is not to dismiss one in favor of the other, but to learn to hold them together. We must also acknowledge the cultural layer. Many women are taught to mistrust male attention unless it is stated directly. To read subtle signals feels risky. To believe in one's own perception feels naive. And so the persona insists on safety, on cool indifference, on restraint. The fracture is widened by this social conditioning. Yet the body does not lie. The unconscious communicates through posture, tone, and movement. When we ignore it, we cut ourselves off from one of the most reliable guides we possess. This disconnection is the true danger, not the risk of misreading. For without trust in perception, there can be no authentic relationship, not with another and not with oneself. The first fracture, then, is an inner wound. It is the wound of mistrusting one's own gaze. It is the wound of silencing the instinct that knows before words arrive. And it is the wound of letting fear write the story instead of allowing truth to emerge. We may call it a fracture, but in truth, it is a threshold. It is the point where the shadow begins to stir. It shows us where we wear the mask too tightly, where we have grown afraid of our own perception. And though it feels painful, it is the place from which deeper awareness will eventually rise. This part of the journey is not about resolving the doubt. It is about naming it. It is about recognizing that the fracture exists. Only by seeing it can we move forward into the next stage where shadow and persona will confront one another more openly. For now, we sit with the wound of uncertainty. We notice how it feels when a greeting leaves us unsure, when politeness and attraction blur together, when the unconscious speaks, but the mind resists. That discomfort is not meaningless. It is the invitation to grow. And so the first fracture sets the stage. It tells us that what looks small may carry deep weight. It shows us that repression does not erase it, only distorts. It reminds us that every time we doubt our own perception, we give more power to the shadow. In the silence after the greeting, we feel at the distance between what was seen and what we allowed ourselves to believe. That is the wound we must face. That is the fracture from which the rest of the journey begins. The fracture we spoke of does not remain harmless. It opens a space where two forces begin to confront one another: the persona, which wishes to appear composed, and the shadow, which carries the unspoken longing. In the ordinary rhythm of daily greetings, these two voices quietly battle for expression. On the surface, the persona is polite. She offers a controlled smile, an appropriate handshake, the same phrases she would use with anyone. This mask protects her from embarrassment, from rejection, from the risk of being misunderstood. It is the part of her that wants to appear steady, untouched by emotion. Yet beneath the mask, the shadow pushes forward. It carries the flutter in the chest, the warmth in the eyes, the subtle lean of the body. It knows what is felt even when it cannot be said. The tension between persona and shadow creates a double story. Outwardly, she may look neutral. Inwardly, she feels a quiet storm. She says to herself, "Stay calm, do not reveal too much." But the unconscious speaks anyway through gestures she cannot fully control. The slight hesitation before letting go of his hand, the sudden brightness in her voice, the way her posture softens without decision. These are the shadow's expressions. They are not wrong. They are simply unacknowledged. Jung wrote that the shadow is not evil in itself, but the container of all that the persona denies. Here, the denied element is vulnerability. The persona wants strength through composure. The shadow insists that attraction is real and should be felt. When these two collide, she feels shame, as if her own body has betrayed her. Yet it is not betrayal. It is truth, demanding a place at the table. This conflict repeats itself. Each time she doubts her instincts, the persona grows stricter. Each time she feels warmth rising, the shadow grows louder. Over time, the cost of this split becomes heavy. She begins to mistrust herself in subtle ways. Did I smile too much? Did I stand too close? Did I imagine his interest? This constant questioning erodes confidence. It leaves her guarded, and the simple beauty of connection becomes tangled in analysis. The persona, when too rigid, creates isolation. It tells her that safety comes from hiding emotion. But the shadow will not remain silent. Unlived feelings resurface in dreams, in sudden mood shifts, in unexplained longing. What she represses in greetings may reappear later in resentment or despair. The very thing she sought to control becomes the thing that controls her. We see this clearly in patterns. Some women notice that men lose interest quickly, yet they do not realize how much of their true warmth was hidden behind the mask of caution. Others notice they fall into sudden intensity, almost overwhelming the other because the shadow held back too long bursts. Fourth, all at once. Both patterns come from the same struggle, a lack of harmony between persona and shadow. To live authentically is not to erase the persona. We need it. It helps us navigate society, maintain boundaries, and move with grace. But when the persona becomes a wall instead of a window, we lose connection. The shadow then becomes the uninvited guest who knocks harder and harder until it is noticed. Consider the body itself as a mirror of this battle. The eyes wish to linger, but the persona forces them to look away. The hand wishes to reach out, but the persona keeps it at her side. The tone wishes to soften, but the persona sharpens it with practiced indifference. The shadow, however, leaves traces. A smile that arrives too quickly. A nervous laugh that escapes without reason. These are signs that the unconscious is already shaping behavior even against the ego's will. The cost of ignoring this dynamic is subtle but real. She may begin to feel invisible even though others do notice her. She may believe she has no effect even when her presence alters the room. She may start to accept the lie that attraction belongs only to others, not to her. These are illusions born of disconnection. Jung warned that the shadow, when denied, does not disappear. It governs from the dark. Here, that governance looks like endless second-guessing mistrust of compliments, suspicion of warmth. The woman begins to sabotage her own perception. She convinces herself that nothing is happening even when the evidence lies before her. In truth, she is not fighting him. She is fighting herself. To see this pattern is painful, but it is also a gift. For in recognizing the mask and the shadow, she stands at the threshold of individuation, the process of becoming whole. Individuation does not ask her to discard the persona, nor to surrender to every impulse of the shadow. It asks for integration. It asks for truth. Imagine the greeting as a symbolic stage. The persona walks forward with rehearsed lines. The shadow waits in the wings, carrying the unspoken script. Both want to be heard. The true self is not either one alone. It is the voice that can honor both without losing balance. It is the awareness that can say, "Yes, I feel this," while still choosing how to respond. This awareness is not easy. It requires honesty, patience, and the courage to face discomfort. Many avoid it because it feels safer to live only in the persona, keeping attraction locked away. But safety at that cost becomes loneliness. Others live only in the shadow, letting impulse drive every connection, often leading to confusion or heartbreak. Balance is the path forward. When we ignore the shadow, we deny our humanity. When we worship the persona, we deny our soul. The work of individuation begins when we admit that both are present, both are speaking, and both need to be understood. The greeting becomes more than a polite moment. It becomes a microcosm of this entire drama. In this sense, every uncertain hello is an opportunity. It reveals how we manage vulnerability, how we wear masks, how we allow or resist desire. To notice this is already a step toward wholeness. To observe one's own mask, slipping to feel the shadow rising, and to choose awareness instead of repression, that is progress. The shadow versus persona dynamic shows us why many remain trapped in repetitive patterns. They seek certainty in others while avoiding the uncertainty within themselves. But the truth is clear. Until you reconcile your own mask and longing, no greeting will feel clear, no connection will feel steady. This is not a condemnation. It is a call to patience. Jung reminded us that the unconscious does not vanish. It waits for recognition. When you greet another, you are also greeting parts of yourself. The persona and the shadow meet in that same moment. The way you manage that meeting shapes everything that follows. So here in the tension between mask and truth, we discover the heart of the journey. The shadow presses forward. The persona resists, and the self hovers in between, waiting for a more authentic synthesis. This is the true fracture at mid-journey, not between two people, but within the one who seeks connection. The task now is not to resolve it instantly, but to see it, to admit that both voices are real, to acknowledge that safety and longing are often in conflict, to recognize that until this inner drama is faced, every outer greeting will echo with uncertainty. And so, part 3 closes with this realization. The shadow and persona cannot be ignored. They stand together at the doorway of every meeting. One wears the mask, the other holds the secret. Only by seeing both can the journey toward wholeness continue. The struggle between persona and shadow can feel endless. One part seeks safety and control, the other presses for honesty and feeling. Yet there comes a moment when the tension itself becomes unbearable, and in that discomfort, an awakening begins. Awakening does not arrive through sudden certainty. It comes through a shift in how we see. Instead of asking, "Was he interested? Was I imagining things?" the question becomes, "What did my body already know?" This small turn of awareness transforms the entire landscape. In a greeting, the body reacts before the mind constructs its story. The eyes brighten, the breath changes, the voice carries a softness that cannot be planned. These are not mistakes, they are messages. To awaken is to realize that these messages form a kind of alphabet, a language of attraction, trust, and recognition that speaks without words. When a woman begins to notice this alphabet, she moves out of confusion and into clarity. She sees that a glance at her hair is not casual, it is attention. A genuine smile, one that lights the eyes, is not politeness, it is joy. A subtle touch that lingers is not accident, it is closeness, seeking acknowledgement. These signs are not fragments of fantasy, they are symbols of the unconscious making itself visible. Jung often reminded us that the unconscious does not simply live in dreams. It also shapes the gestures, postures, and expressions of daily life. To awaken is to realize that the unconscious speaks through the body in every greeting, every pause, every smile. The shadow is not only revealed in nightmares, it also reveals itself in how a man holds eye contact or how a woman unconsciously leans forward to meet it. This awareness dissolves the tyranny of doubt. Instead of mistrusting her instincts, she begins to trust the signals she perceives. She does not rush to conclusions, but she allows herself to believe in her own perception. The body speaks honestly long before the mouth catches up. This realization is freeing because it shifts the weight of proof away from words alone and honors the full spectrum of human expression. Awakening also reframes vulnerability. What once felt like weakness, the quickened heartbeat, the sudden warmth in the face now becomes guidance. These signals are no longer embarrassments to hide, they are truths to accept. The shadow is not the enemy. It is the voice of the unlived self reminding us that we are still capable of feeling deeply. In this way, awakening is a movement toward individuation. Individuation does not mean becoming perfect or always certain. It means learning to live in alignment with what is true, both conscious and unconscious. The persona no longer dominates the shadow, no longer hides. They begin to cooperate, revealing a self that is whole. Think of how this changes the experience of a greeting. Instead of wearing the mask too tightly, she allows the mask to soften. Instead of repressing the shadow, she lets it breathe through a genuine smile, an open gaze, a relaxed presence. The moment is no longer a battlefield, it becomes a bridge. Awakening also involves patience. The unconscious does not reveal everything at once. A smile may be a spark, not a promise. A touch may be a sign, not a declaration. To awaken is not to demand certainty, but to live with attentiveness. It is to read the alphabet without rushing to write the entire book. This is where fear begins to dissolve. Fear thrives on the unknown, on the constant suspicion that we are misreading the moment. Clarity emerges when we trust what the body reveals and accept that even subtle symbols hold meaning. Awakening is not about control, it is about presence. When we are present, we no longer need to force answers. We can let the truth unfold. From a Jungian perspective, this stage is where projection begins to loosen. Instead of filling the moment with past disappointments, she allows herself to see what is actually there. The greeting is no longer burdened by old ghosts. It becomes a fresh space where two people meet, transformed by even the smallest reaction. This reframe has profound consequences. A woman who once doubted every gesture now begins to carry herself differently. She trusts her perception so she no longer needs constant reassurance. She reads the signs calmly without desperation. She no longer treats every smile as either proof or rejection. She accepts it as part of a larger conversation between unconscious selves. This shift is the foundation of authentic confidence. Confidence in this sense is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is the quiet certainty that one's own perception is valid. It is the strength to believe in the subtle messages of the body without dismissing them as fantasy. Such confidence cannot be faked because it arises from integration. The persona and the shadow, once at war, now begin to move in rhythm. Awakening is also deeply symbolic. The greeting itself becomes a ritual. The threshold of encounter is no longer just a social custom. It is an altar where truth is revealed in gestures, tones, and glances. Every hello becomes a mirror. Every smile becomes a doorway. Every touch becomes a symbol. To awaken is to recognize these symbols for what they are, expressions of the unconscious reaching toward connection. At this stage, the woman also discovers that her own response carries equal weight. She is not merely reading another's body, she is expressing her own truth. Her smile, her posture, her willingness to hold eye contact, these two speak. And when offered authentically, they leave a lasting impression. A greeting is no longer one-sided. It becomes a dialogue of souls. The beauty of awakening is that it transforms what once felt confusing into something meaningful. Where before there was only doubt, now there is curiosity. Where before there was shame, now there is acceptance. Where before there was silence, now there is subtle communication. Awakening does not remove risk, but it gives her the clarity to face it with grace. Jung wrote that symbols carry a transformative power. A smile, a glance, a touch, each is a symbol that can open new paths of understanding. To awaken is to honor these small moments, knowing they are the soul's way of speaking. This awareness deepens life, for it teaches us that truth is not always loud. Sometimes truth is a whisper. And so the awakening arrives quietly. It does not announce itself with certainty. It reveals itself in patience, in clarity, in the ability to read the alphabet of the body without dismissing or exaggerating. It teaches us that attraction, when genuine, is visible, even in silence. With this reframe, the journey turns. What began as doubt and fracture now becomes recognition and trust. The shadow and persona are no longer locked in battle. They are beginning to dance, each bringing something essential to the moment of encounter. This is the heart of Part 4. Awakening is not the end of the story, but it is the first glimpse of wholeness. It is the recognition that a greeting is more than courtesy. It is a window into the unconscious, an opening into connection, a ritual of truth. And when we learn to see it clearly, we awaken not only to others, but to ourselves. Awakening prepares the ground, but it is choice that anchors transformation. Recognition of the body's alphabet means little unless it is followed by an intentional response. A greeting that once left her doubting now becomes an opportunity to choose presence. This is the stage where the boundary appears. A boundary is not a wall, nor is it a demand. It is the quiet declaration of how one wishes to live. Jung often spoke of individuation as the process of becoming whole. Wholeness requires that we stop living only for others' perceptions. It requires that we act from inner clarity rather than from fear of rejection. When a woman begins to trust her perception, she no longer waits passively for the other to define the moment. She chooses how she greets, how she smiles, how she stands. Her choice is not performance, it is authenticity. The persona, once rigid, becomes flexible. A mask she can adjust rather than a prison she cannot escape. The shadow, once overwhelming, becomes integrated, a source of vitality rather than an intruder. Consider the difference between reaction and response. Reaction is automatic. The nervous laugh, the quick withdrawal, the guarded indifference. Response is conscious, the steady eye contact, the relaxed smile, the calm presence. To respond authentically is to set a boundary. It is to say, without words, this is who I am, and this is how I choose to meet you. Boundaries are often misunderstood. Many think they are about pushing others away. In truth, they are about defining the space where genuine connection can occur. A clear boundary is an invitation. It tells the other person, if you step toward me with respect, you are welcome. If not, I will step back. This clarity liberates both sides. From a Jungian lens, the act of setting a boundary is an act of individuation. It is the ego aligning with the deeper self. The persona no longer dominates the shadow, no longer erupts. Instead, the conscious self chooses. This conscious choice is the essence of transformation. How does this look in practice? It may be as simple as not pretending indifference when warmth is felt. She allows her smile to stay, but not to overreach. She maintains eye contact, but does not cling. She speaks with calm tone, not hurried words. These are small acts, yet they shift the energy of the moment entirely. Choice also means knowing when not to engage. If the signals are one-sided, if respect is lacking, she can withhold her warmth without guilt. This is the protective side of the boundary. It ensures that her authentic energy is not wasted on those unwilling to meet it. Jung reminded us that the unlived life of the parent shapes the child. In the same way, the unlived truth of the self shapes the present moment. To live truthfully requires saying both yes and no. Transformation appears not in grand gestures, but in consistency. Each greeting becomes an opportunity to practice authenticity. Each smile becomes a chance to embody calm rather than fear. Over time, this becomes second nature. The woman who once doubted now stands steady, not because she is certain of others, but because she is certain of herself. This choice reshapes attraction itself. What once depended on guessing now depends on resonance. She no longer chases confirmation. She observes whether the other meets her presence with equal depth. If not, she walks away without bitterness. If yes, she welcomes it with grace. Either outcome affirms her integrity. The symbolic power of this stage cannot be overstated. To choose one's response is to move from being acted upon to being an actor. It is to step onto the stage of life not as a masked performer, but as an authentic participant. Jung described individuation as the journey toward the self, the archetype of wholeness. Every boundary set with clarity, every greeting offered with truth, is a step toward that self. In the language of symbols, the greeting becomes a threshold. Before she stood there, uncertain, pulled between persona and shadow. Now, she steps through, intentionally aware of what she brings and what she will allow. This act of stepping through is transformation. We can see how standards replace demands here. A demand is outward, a plea for others to behave differently. A standard is inward, a choice to live by one's own truth. Instead of demanding proof of interest, she sets the standard that only those who meet her authenticity will remain in her circle. This shift is subtle, yet powerful. It creates dignity. Boundaries also bring freedom from repetition. When the unconscious is ignored, we repeat the same painful cycles. By setting conscious boundaries, the cycle is broken. She no longer has to relive the doubt, the mistrust, the self-erasure. Instead, she lives with clarity, even when the outcome is uncertain. This is the true gift of individuation freedom from unconscious repetition. The act of choosing does not guarantee comfort. Boundaries can feel lonely at first. They strip away false connections, leaving fewer but deeper encounters. Yet this very narrowing is what makes space for authenticity. In a world that often values quantity, the boundary restores quality. This stage also reveals something important about love. Real love cannot be forced through manipulation or constant proof-seeking. It arises when two people meet with equal authenticity. Boundaries ensure that this meeting is possible. They filter out what is false and protect what is true. Transformation is not about controlling another's behavior. It is about aligning one's own. When she chooses to meet each greeting with authenticity, she steps into a new rhythm of life. The persona becomes her servant, not her master. The shadow becomes her ally, not her saboteur. The self emerges as the quiet center guiding her choices with wisdom. Jung taught that the process of individuation often begins in tension and ends in integration. Here, we see that arc embodied. The fracture between politeness and interest has been reframed. The struggle between persona and shadow has been acknowledged. And now, through conscious choice, integration begins. To live with boundaries is to live with dignity. To greet another without performance is to reveal the self. And to stand in one's truth, regardless of outcome, is to embody transformation. This is not the loud confidence of ego, but the quiet confidence of authenticity. So, Part 5 closes with this realization. Transformation is not in waiting for another to confess. It is in choosing how you respond, what you allow, and what you carry forward. Every greeting becomes an act of individuation, a chance to live from the center rather than from fear. Every journey must find its place of rest after doubt, after the conflict between mask and shadow, after the awakening and the conscious choice. What remains is integration. This final stage is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is the soft landing where the soul accepts its own truth. A greeting may still seem like a small thing to the outside world, but once you have walked through this reflection, you see that no greeting is ever just a routine. Each one is a threshold. It is the opening where the unconscious shows its symbols and where you decide how to respond. It is here, at this small doorway, that much of our inner work is revealed. The fracture we once carried between politeness and interest no longer controls the moment. The persona still exists, but it has softened. The shadow still stirs, but it no longer overwhelms. Both are seen, both are honored, both have found their place. The self that emerges is calmer, more whole, more able to meet the world without fear. This is the gift of individuation. Not perfection, not certainty, but integration. You begin to live with a sense of dignity that does not depend on the reactions of others. You trust your perception without needing constant proof. You choose presence instead of performance. And this choice gives every meeting a new depth. Think of the symbolic contrast. Before, the greeting felt like a test. Was I noticed? Did I imagine it? Now it feels like a mirror. What do I carry into this moment? What do I reveal without words? The focus shifts from doubt to authenticity. In that shift, peace arrives. Jung often reminded us that what is repressed will always return, sometimes in distorted forms. But when we acknowledge what we feel, even in something as ordinary as a smile or a touch, we free ourselves from that distortion. We live closer to truth. This truth is not loud. It does not shout. It whispers through the body, through symbols, through gestures. To live this way is to step into a different rhythm. You no longer chase what is uncertain. You no longer silence your instincts. You move with a kind of grounded grace, knowing that what is genuine will reveal itself without force. The mask is lighter now. The shadow is not feared. Together, they serve the self which stands quietly at the center. This is the deeper lesson. Attraction, recognition, even love. They are not born only in grand declarations. They begin in the smallest signs. The eyes that soften, the smile that lingers, the voice that shifts. These are not accidents. They are the unconscious speaking. When we learn to hear this language, we learn to live more honestly. The greeting becomes a symbol of life itself. Each day offers thresholds, small doorways, where we can either hide behind masks or step forward authentically. The choice is always there. To greet the world with indifference, or to greet it with presence. To stay in fear, or to live in clarity. And so we close with this: individuation is not about removing all masks. It is about knowing when to wear them and when to set them aside. It is not about erasing the shadow. It is about learning from it, allowing it to enrich the self with depth and vitality. In this balance, we find freedom. A greeting, then, is never just a greeting. It is the soul's quiet ritual. It is the unconscious saying, I see you, I feel you. Something in me is moved by your presence. And it is the conscious self choosing how to respond, not from fear, but from authenticity. When you meet someone next, remember this. The smallest gesture may carry the deepest truth. If you can trust what you see and honor what you feel, you will live closer to the self. And from that center, connection flows naturally. Let this be your takeaway. Peace is not found in controlling how others greet you. Peace is found in how you greet them with steadiness, with clarity, with a self that is whole. As Jung once reflected, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Every threshold, every smile, every gentle hello is a chance to live that privilege. So I leave you with this question to reflect upon: how do you greet the world? And what part of yourself do you allow to speak in that first moment? Thank you for staying with these reflections. If this spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me where you are listening from and what part of this journey touched you most. Because in sharing, we extend the greeting even further. We turn a quiet symbol into a living conversation. And perhaps that is the deepest truth. No greeting is ever small when it comes from the soul.